Hi, I'm Andrew Shovlin. I'm Trackside Engineering Director for the team, and I'm here to answer your questions about the Canadian Grand Prix. We had some issues with Lewis's car before the race, and this actually became apparent after qualifying. We dropped the floor, we noticed there was some oil on the floor, so somewhere there was a leak. We could also see on the data we were losing some hydraulic pressure. Now the issue is that the cars are then in parc ferme overnight. We're not allowed to touch them or to investigate it further. So that investigation moved to Sunday morning when we're allowed to access the cars again, the mechanics can work on them. We had to take the power unit out, we traced the leak to the throttle actuator, and then we made a request to the FIA to change the throttle actuator and some of the associated hydraulics. So that work was quite a big job though. There's a lot to do within that. And it was pretty tight to get Lewis's car back together for the start of the race. Now, we're fairly happy we can do the work in that time. The issue when you have an unknown fault or a leak is you don't know how long it's going to take you to find it, to identify it. We were able to get the car back together. Now, where we were at risk was if we then fired up and we found another problem, if the engine had to come out again, that's when we would have got short on time and perhaps not even been able to start the race. But it was a great job by all the mechanics involved, and quite happily the car was back together in time and finished the race successfully. So with Lewis's stop, we decided to try the overcut. We had an issue in the first stint where, although he was able to match Sebastian's lap times, he couldn't really get close behind because the car was overheating a bit. So he had to leave a bit of the gap. He was having to lift off the throttle to keep it cool. When Sebastian came in, we told Lewis to push, but actually the tyres were degrading a bit. And you can see his last two laps were actually no faster than the ones before that. And that was fundamentally why the overcut didn't work. The reason why we kept him out the extra lap was just that if there had been a safety car, we would have inherited the lead by virtue of the shorter pit stop. Now, looking at it again though, you can see that in the second stint, we were a lot quicker. And some of this is because we were able to make a cooling change in the pit stop that suddenly meant Lewis could really push the car harder and we were able to push up behind Sebastian. Now, if we'd known that we had that pace difference, we would definitely had a go at the undercut. We would have stopped him one lap earlier and it would have been close, but maybe it would have worked. But even if it didn't work, Lewis would have been on hot tyres as Sebastian joined the track on cold tyres, and we could have maybe had a go at overtaking on the lap. So, of course, what we didn't work. We would do something differently next time, but you're absolutely right. We would have tried something else. It's just we would have gone one lap before Sebastian rather than one lap earlier than we did. This question's referring to the term, the window is closed, but that was actually Lewis who said it to us. It wasn't Bonner, who's engineer, telling Lewis. And what Lewis meant is my opportunity to attack, to have a go at making a pass has gone. And it's just because when you're pushing the tyres very hard, you slide around behind another car and they get hot, they lose grip. And all he meant was I haven't got that performance advantage anymore to attack. And he's just telling us that because he's essentially saying, I'm going to back off a bit now, I'm going to give the car and the tyres a bit of a rest. We might take the opportunity to turn the power unit down again if he's not going to be really challenging Seb. And he was able to then have another go later in the race. But it's all really just the communication that we have between the driver and the pits to make sure we know what everyone's thinking. Valtteri's pace in the early part of the race was defined by the cars ahead of him, the two Renaults. And he also had the same issue with a bit of overheating as Lewis had. He wasn't able to get close enough to be able to threaten them with an overtake. He was having to sit a bit further back. You get cleaner air that's coming in, it's better at cooling the car. He's also focusing on trying to keep the power unit duty low so it doesn't generate as much temperature. And really, he couldn't do much else than just sit there and wait for their soft tyres to drop off and for them to get out of the way. Now, you can see later in the stint, though, Valtteri's pace then picks up, and there's a point towards the end of the stint, he's actually running faster than Lewis. So it wasn't so much an issue with Valtteri or Valtteri's car. It was just that we were a bit undercooled, trying to go for the fastest package we could put together in qualifying, but that meant we were struggling a bit in traffic. We hadn't intended to be so far down the grid, but like Lewis, we were able to make the change at the pit stop, open it up, and then he was able to push much harder in the later part of the race. And you could see every time Lewis got close and tried to overtake, it was very, very difficult for him to really close that Ferrari down on the straight, even with DRS. So we were making some progress there, But the Ferrari is a very fast car in a straight line. We're not as quick as them, but we seem to be a lot better than they are in the corners. And this balances out to roughly similar lap times, but when you're stuck behind one, it makes it much harder to get past. Now, we know that that difference is going to come from one of two things. It's either the amount of power they've got or the amount of drag that their car has got. And it may be a combination of those two factors. We have got some scope to reduce the drag on our car running smaller wings, but one factor you get with the DRS is when you trigger it, it stalls the wing, and the drag that it has isn't so dependent on the size of it. So the wings that we had that would have been sensible for running in a track like Montreal would never have really given us a top speed that could have matched the Ferrari. Therefore, Lewis was looking a lot at what he could do on the braking. Could he brake very late, stay close? And if you can get really tight in their toe, you lose a bit of drag anyway, and that will create the opportunities. As you can see, it was very, very difficult for him to get any opportunity to pass on the straight. Thank you very much for all your questions. We'll be back after the French Grand Prix to answer some more.